has just announced a series of retaliatory measures, including 25% tariffs on a variety of American goods. Here's the Canadian Finance Minister breaking it down.
US President Donald Trump has followed through on his tariff threats. He has signed an order to levy 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico.
I am announcing Canada will be responding to the US trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
The trade friendship between Canada and the United States has turned into a hit-and-run struggle. In recent days, the Trump administration's tariffs on Canadian steel and automobiles, coupled with Ottawa's massive retaliatory tariffs, have escalated the situation. Both the United States automotive giants and Canada's energy sector are caught in the eye of this new trade storm, and this time the challenge comes not from Mexico or Europe, but from Canada seen as the closest ally. How will giant brands such as Tesla, Ford and GMC experience difficulties in the Canadian market? Is the question at the center of this tension. After March 4th, Canada imposed a 25% tariff on 30 billion Canadian dollars worth of goods in its first round of tariff retaliation against the United States. And furthermore, if the situation does not change, a second round of retaliatory tariffs worth 125 billion Canadian dollars will be imposed in 21 days. But it is not only the size of the second round of retaliation that is critical, but also its specific focus. It covers the largest industries from automotive to energy oil, electricity, and gas from steel to aluminum. So what does Canada's second round of retaliatory tariffs, worth a staggering 125 billion Canadian dollars mean? And how will these tariffs affect the American automotive and energy sectors, and what does it mean for giant brands like Tesla, GM and Ford? We are looking for big answers to big questions. Who will win in this trade war, or will everyone lose? Let us take a look at all these developments together, because this economic crisis ignited in America's closest neighbor is not only affecting the two countries, but also the world first. Let us remember briefly. The trade relationship between Canada and the United States has long been one of the most important and stable economic partnerships in the world, with over 8,800 kilometers of shared border and an annual trade volume of over $700 billion. The economic ties between these two North American giants are deeply intertwined, but 2025 marked the turning point for this historically strong partnership. Washington's new tariffs and Canada's harsh retaliation are shaking the balance of trade between the two countries, particularly targeting the automotive, steel, aluminum, and energy sectors. These tariffs directly affect not only companies, but also the pockets of millions of workers and consumers. So how did this trade war between Canada and the United States start? It all started when the United States imposed tariffs of 25% on goods imported from Canada and 10% on energy exports. But very importantly tomorrow, tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. The Trump administration claimed that national security concerns were behind this step. In particular, it cited the need to stem the flow of illegal immigration and ban substances. However, it is debatable whether this explanation coincides with deeper economic considerations. The Trump administration did not stop that. Imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian steel in aluminum products, this step had serious implications for trade, as well as strategic sectors. On March 4th, Canada responded to the Trump tariffs with immediate retaliation. Former Prime Minister Trudeau imposed a first round of 25% tariffs on approximately 30 billion Canadian dollars, $20.6 billion worth of goods from United States exporters.
Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
A second round of tariffs at the same rate will be imposed in 3 weeks on goods worth 25 billion Canadian dollars, about $86.67 billion. However, Canada's first round of retaliation officially went into effect on March 12th. There is now almost no time left for Canada's second round of retaliatory tariffs, worth 125 billion Canadian dollars. But the Trudeau administration has just changed. In Canada, it is a matter of curiosity how Mark Carney, who took his place, will proceed. But Mr. Carney's statements point to a second round of retaliation. When accepting the leadership of his party on March 9th, Mr. Carney said that Canada would not lift retaliatory tariffs unless the United States showed respect. for his country. He made that message even clearer on his European tour this week. At a press conference at the Canadian High Commission in London, he said of the United States leadership, "They are disrespectful, they are not helpful. And they need to stop before they sit down and talk about our broader partnership. They will have to stop. It is understood that Mr. Carney is in no rush to have these talks with Mr. Trump and believes Canada's approach should be slow, careful, and measured rather than rushing to beg for tariff relief or seeking a deal under pressure. It is significant that he has yet to have a phone call with Mr. Trump since he was sworn in as Prime Minister last week. The big trade issues will need to be addressed in a more comprehensive way, and they will be addressed from a Canadian perspective, from a position of strength." Mr. Carney added. Mr. Carney also said for the first time that there are limits to his dollar for dollar retaliatory approach to United States tariffs, indicating that he would stick to the measures put in place by Mr. Trudeau, but may be less willing to escalate. This means that Carney could impose tariffs worth 125 billion Canadian dollars at any time if the United States does not lift the tariffs. Canada is preparing a second round of retaliation worth 125 billion Canadian dollars, about $86.67 billion in the coming days. This new move could seriously shake the automotive sector, in particular which products will be hit by this second wave of Canadian tariffs against the United States. Cars and trucks brands like Tesla, Ford, GMC will be directly affected. High-budget products such as steel and aluminum. Special tariffs on Tesla are on the agenda. Canada announced that it will impose an additional 25% tariff on cars and electric vehicles imported from the United States. This decision will directly affect the prices and sales of brands such as Tesla, Ford, and GMC in the Canadian market. The automotive industry relies on global supply chains, and United States tariffs disrupt these chains and increase production costs. For example, the Chevrolet Silverado and GMC Sierra pickups, two of GM's most profitable models, are assembled on both sides of the border and are directly affected by these tariffs. Some 5.3 million light vehicles are produced in Canada and Mexico, 70% of which go to the United States market. The parts used to produce these vehicles are transported across the border, and the tariffs increase costs. Canada's retaliatory tariffs will also cover steel, aerospace products, and some other products imported from the U.S. This could lead to higher prices in the automotive sector and slow the adoption of electric vehicles in Canada. Canada's retaliation was not limited to tariffs. The province of Ontario has also responded to the United States. With an energy move, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced a 25% surcharge on electricity supplied to United States in response to Washington's tariffs. Ford said he could increase this rate, saying if the U.S. escalates this, I will not hesitate to cut off electricity completely. I feel very sorry for the American people because they did not start this trade war. There is only one person responsible, and that is President Trump. These statements show that the trade crisis has now reached a dimension that threatens energy security. The White House warned Canada that Ontario's plans to cut off electricity could have serious consequences. The escalation in the trade war could shake one of the world's largest trading partnerships. In this sense, the Canadian dollar depreciated. Stocks fell, and the S&P/TSX Composite Index fell 1.5%. The Bank of Canada warned that this tariff war could shrink the country's economy by 3%. In 2 years, if the crisis deepens, exports from Canada to the United States will decline. Production will fall, jobs will be lost. Prices of imported goods from the United States would rise, and consumers and businesses would spend less. Let us remember what Canada's first round of retaliation includes. Canada and the United States have one of the most extensive trade partnerships in the world. Trade between the two countries involves the flow of $2.5 billion worth of goods and services every day and supports millions of jobs. But new tariffs are likely to upset this balance. Commenting on the United States tariffs on Canada, Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly said, "We are imposing $60 billion worth of retaliatory tariffs on American goods. We are also launching an advertising campaign in 12 different United States states. Canadians are sending the message that there are no winners in a trade war." In this context, billboards on highways in states such as Florida, Nevada, Georgia, and New Hampshire will feature ads about Canada's retaliation. The move aims to emphasize the impact of the trade war on the American public especially ahead of the United States elections in November. Let us take a look at the details of Canada's retaliation plan against the United States. On March 4th, Canada imposed tariffs on 30 billion Canadian dollars worth of United States goods in response to United States tariffs on Canadian imports. Which products are covered by these taxes? Orange juice, peanut butter, wine, spirits, beer and coffee, household appliances, clothing, footwear, motorcycles and cosmetics, some paper products, and electronic devices, and more are coming. As of April 2nd, the tariffs will be extended to cover more products. Now let us talk about the reciprocal moves on steel and aluminum. The United States imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. Canada responded swiftly and imposed an additional 25% tariff on a total of 29.8 Canadian dollars worth of United States goods, products covered by the scope. 12.6 billion Canadian dollars worth of steel products, 3 billion Canadian dollars worth of aluminum products, 14 billion Canadian dollars worth of appliances, computer servers, displays, sports equipment, and cast iron products. These duties will remain in place until the United States lifts the tariffs. Meanwhile, Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, announced a series of economic measures aimed at protecting the country's interests, consumers, workers, and businesses. Carney plans to mitigate the negative effects of trade crisis by minimizing Canada's dependence on foreign trade. Tariffs on United States goods make them more expensive in Canada and reduce demand from Canadian consumers. This puts pressure on American businesses and the government to withdraw the tariffs. At the same time, the Canadian government is encouraging consumers to switch to domestic products as the prices of American goods rise. Domestic market opportunities for Canadian producers increase. Canadian businesses, whose exports are affected by the United States tariffs, aim to offset the economic contraction by increasing their domestic sales. This creates more opportunities in Canada's domestic markets, supporting the economy in this sense. Prime Minister Carney aims to mitigate the effects of the trade wars by introducing tax payment deferrals for Canadian businesses. He also aims to support small and medium-sized businesses by announcing a new support package of 450 million Canadian dollars. Carney stated that these measures will secure the Canadian economy, emphasizing that we are in a crisis not of our own making, and minimizing external dependence. At the same time, Carney plans to invest in major infrastructure projects, such as transportation, energy, and trade corridors. Steps will be taken to strengthen the economy by doubling the domestic loan guaranteed program. In addition, projects such as the Port of Churchill in Manitoba and liquid natural gas facilities on the West Coast will reduce Canada's dependence on imports and ensure sustainable growth. Carney's measures aim to minimize the damage of the trade war by strengthening Canada's economic independence. So, how will this trade war between Canada and the United States play out? The future of Canada-United States trade could be shaped by several factors. Governments could change their tariff policies. If the economic damage grows, the ASUNGA could be renegotiated to meet the economic needs of both countries. Businesses could reorganize supply chains, optimize production processes, and look to new markets to mitigate the impact of tariffs. In addition, Canada is strengthening trade partnerships in different regions to offset trade tensions with the United States. In particular, steps are being taken to increase its relations with countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Canada's strengthening of economic ties with countries such as Japan, Australia, and Vietnam under the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is seen as part of its strategy to reduce its dependence on the United States. These moves are a reflection of Canada's efforts to maintain its long-term economic stability by diversifying its global supply chains. For Canada and the United States to maintain economic stability and growth, they must find common ground. The new tariffs in 2025 have created significant economic and political challenges to trade relations. While these policies aim to protect domestic industries, in the long run they could disrupt supply chains, increase consumer prices, and escalate diplomatic tensions. The next few months will be decisive for business and policy makers, for Canada and the United States, to remain each other's most vital trading partners. Cooperation and economic pragmatism must be at the forefront. After all, trade wars are not limited to tariffs. They have a profound impact on supply chains, investment flows, and consumer markets. Canada's retaliatory measures against the United States are increasing economic pressure, especially targeting strategic sectors, such as automotive and heavy industry, while giant brands such as Tesla, Ford, and GMC could suffer huge losses with the new tariffs. Canada's turn to the domestic market and strengthening trade ties with the Asia-Pacific region could be a critical move to reduce dependence on the United States. Will Washington back down in response to Canada's moves, or will the Canadian and United States economies drift into a long-term divergence? Do not forget to share your views in the comments. Thank you for tuning in.